Hi everyone, and welcome to Spotlight with Scientists in School. Today we're going to explore the fascinating world of honeybees, and to do so we're going to talk to Kathryn Knowles. She's an Apiary Research Assistant at the Honeybee Research Center at the University of Guelph. In this episode, we're going to look at beehives, we're going to explore worker bees, drones, and we're even going to find the queen bee. So join us as we discover why honeybees are an important part of our ecosystem and what you can do to help.
Hi there, my name is Kathryn Knowles and I'm an Apiary Research Assistant at the University of Guelph Honeybee Research Center. So a day in the life here, it's different every single day, which is awesome because I like variety in my day. And it changes also throughout the season as well. So spring, summer, fall, and winter are all very different seasons. So we always start our day off here with a big meeting inside, and we all gather together and we talk about what type of research activities we're going to be doing throughout the day, how we can support each other, and what specific projects we hope to accomplish. And then depending on the day, we'll go off and we'll do these various activities. So that could range from collecting honey and moving boxes around to going in and inspecting hives for the queens or inspecting them for disease, and also helping to support the PhD students in their research endeavors. So a lot of the work we've been doing this summer has been really concentrated on helping these students with the work that they're doing. Bees are fascinating insects to study because they are an excellent example of extremely advanced socialized insect colonies. So kind of like other insects, they form these really intricate and complex social hierarchies or caste systems. And they do this to become really efficient in how they're able to survive throughout the year and perform specific tasks. So they're really interesting to kind of study and understand. And also they're really useful to humans for agricultural purposes. A lot of the time honeybees are excellent pollinators and we rely on them for a lot of their pollination services. And in addition to this, of course, honey, who doesn't love honey? That's a big plus here. So bees are considered insects, honeybees, and that's because they have three distinct body parts. They have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen, and they all do different things. The head is where mainly they're able to control their senses. The thorax is their main body part, kind of like their chest, and their abdomen is for things like digestion, and for queens, it's where she has all of her reproductive system. So in addition to this, they also have 6 legs. So all insects have 6 legs, and these allow them to crawl around the hive and to grasp onto different parts of the colony. So on their legs, they have these little barbs or hairs coming out of their like feet. And this allows them to kind of hold on to the colony. So when you see a frame, it's sticking straight up, and they're allowed to move up and down really easily because they've got those barbs to allow them to stick to it. So there's 4 key life stages for a honeybee, and those involve an egg, a larva, a pupa, and an adult. Every bee starts off as a little egg, and so the queen will go in and she'll measure the size of a cell, and depending on the size of the cell, whether it's small or large, she'll decide to lay either a fertilized or unfertilized egg. And all fertilized eggs become worker bees or queen bees, whereas unfertilized eggs become drones or male bees. And they all have different responsibilities, but they'll start off as this little egg, and they'll be fed this really rich secretion called royal jelly for the first 3 days. Then after that, there'll be a larva, and they'll develop for approximately another 4 to 6 days in the larva stage. And then what will happen is the worker bees will come over and they'll cover the cell with a little wax capping, and the larva will continue to grow until it becomes a pupa, and it'll spin a cocoon kind of like a butterfly, and it'll remain in that stage for another 8 to 10 days. And after that, on the 21st day, the pupa will emerge as an adult worker bee. So they'll come out and they'll kind of look really fuzzy, and we call those baby bees. So honeybees, like I said, have different hierarchy or caste systems, and there are 3, and it'll kind of dictate what their role is inside the hive. So most of the bees that you see here, these are workers, and they kind of appear uniform, and their main role is to support the colony in collecting nectar or pollen, cleaning out cells, taking care of the queens and drones, and of course going out and foraging for more nectar to make honey. So when you think of a honeybee, the general worker is kind of what you think of. Those are the ones that you'll see foraging on plants around the yard. And another caste system that we have are the drones. So these are the male bees, and like I said, they are unfertilized. So these are the drones here, and they appear a little bit larger, and they've got a large abdomen and really big eyes. And that's because when the queen is ready to mate, she'll fly off into these drone congregation areas where there's drones congregating, and their goal is to be able to see the queen really, really well, because they really want to mate with the queen so that they can release all of their genetic information out into nature. So they don't really do anything else other than hopefully mating with the queen. So if you see them inside the colony, what they're doing is they're just kind of walking around, and all of the worker bees are taking care of them. So they'll feed them and they'll clean them, and then when it comes to fall, they'll actually be kicked out of their hive because it's too much work to feed them all winter long, and they won't do anything to help keep the hive going. So they'll actually be kicked out in the fall and winter. So this right here that I've got in my hand, this is a drone. So like I said, these are the male bees, and they actually can't sting. The reason is because the queens and the workers have a stinger or an ovipositor, and stingers were actually evolved because originally the ovipositor, where the queen will lay an egg, transformed over time as the colony became more socialized and more adapted to that situation where they can work together. And so the ovipositor actually developed into a stinger as a defense mechanism. But these drones, these males, because they don't have ovipositors, they didn't develop these stingers. So they won't be able to sting you at all. So I could put it on my face and be totally fine. So when we're looking for the queen bee, there are a few places that we like to look first because she's most likely to be there. So along the edges is where you're most likely going to have your honey or your pollen or any empty frames, whereas the queen is most likely to be in the center, and we call this the brood chamber. So this is where she's laying the majority of her eggs that will become larva, pupa, and then an adult bee. So she'll stick around in the center, so we'll just go along each frame until we're able to find her, moving them back as we go. And we mark these queens with a paint color, and this is an international code so that we're able to dictate how old the queen bee is. And we also will clip one of her wings, either the left or the right, depending on whether or not it's an even or an odd year date. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna try to find the queen now. This frame here, we've got the queen bee, and you can see that she's got a bright yellow mark on her thorax. So this queen was, she was created last year in 2022. So yellow is indicative of 2022. So we'll go in and we'll put a little paint on her back and clip her, this will be her right wing for last year. And then we'll put her back in the colony, and that's so it's easier to see her as well when we're finding her. The main purpose for a queen bee is that she's in charge of laying all of the eggs inside the colony, and she can actually lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. So it's quite a bit. And so her only purpose is to measure the cells and decide whether or not she wants to lay a fertilized or unfertilized egg. So you can see here all of these cells that are uniform. These are all worker cells. So she'll lay a fertilized egg into those. And sometimes around the edges you see here, they're slightly larger. So she'll measure it with her head and she'll lay an unfertilized egg in those cells there. But another purpose for the queen is to maintain cohesiveness in the colony. So she releases a queen pheromone, and when the workers smell her, they know that everything is okay in the colony and that she's still producing that pheromone and that she's present in laying eggs and reproducing for the purpose of the colony. But if by chance she dies or she gets lost when she goes out for mating flights, if they don't smell her, they'll try to raise their own queens or possibly replace the queen if it's too packed full of bees. So we're going to talk a little bit about how bees are able to produce these hives. So in nature, it wouldn't look this uniform and this clean. Usually what they'll do is they'll find a hollow tree or a broken tree log on the ground, and they'll kind of take it over, and that'll be their colony. So sometimes you can find bees in your walls or in your ceilings. Those are all really great places for them because it's nice and dark, and usually they can keep it nice and warm. But for here, I'll hold this up. So bees produce their homes out of beeswax, as the name suggests. And what they'll do is they'll actually secrete the wax out of their abdomen, and they come off kind of in little flakes, and they actually come off completely white. The only reason why it's either brown or yellow is because it's come in contact with pollen that they've walked all over the beeswax, and then it also ages. So over time it will become darker and more of that dark yellow or brown color. So the reason why they are kind of that traditional hexagon shape is because it's believed it's the most efficient shape that they can use inside the colony. So their goal is to try to pack away as much pollen and nectar reserves as possible for food for over the winter or for long-term storage. And hexagons are really great shapes because they fit really nicely into each other and they can pack it really nice and tight. Pollination is a really important service, and it is when pollen is transferred to the stigma, the ovule, or the plant or flower. And there are many mechanisms for pollination. Could be wind, could be rain, could be birds, but also could be insects. So there's many species of insects that pollinate flowers and shrubs and all the plants that we see around us, and one of which is honeybees. And these are actually really efficient pollinators, and it is thought that they pollinate about 3/4 of North America's flowering plants. And they're really efficient pollinators because they'll actually pollinate in clumps. So rather than picking one flower and going off and picking another flower kind of far away, they'll pollinate entire sections of plants at a time, so they could stick to one specific plant for many, many days. And so they're doing large clumps, and this is really beneficial for agricultural production because rather than kind of sporadically pollinating around the area, they stick to the one or two plants that they're familiar with until they can find potentially a better source. So there's many things that you can do to help save not just honeybees, but also other species of native and non-native bees in your hometown. So just like planting pollinator gardens, one thing that we really like to push out there is planting native trees and bushes, and that's because they're able to grow for longer periods of time, and they'll be able to remain a sustainable food source for many insects over a really long time. And so that's really great to plant in your garden, just like other flowers and small ground coverage. Trees and bushes and shrubs are really great. In addition to this, it's important to help protect our wildlife by not messing around with them too much. So if you see a honeybee or a native bee or another insect in your yard, it's best to leave them alone because they're probably working really hard to go back and either care for themselves or care for other members of their family. So it's important to look but don't touch. They've got important work to do. And lastly, one thing that you can do to help honeybees and other pollinators is to educate yourself. So being a part of programs such as the Honeybee Research Center or other STEM-based courses in your area can help educate you about what you can do in your environment, specifically to your area. Thank you so much for joining me at the University of Guelph Honeybee Research Center. It's been a blast learning about honeybees and the different types of bees with you. Just on a final note, if you're gonna buy honey, try to buy local honey, try to support your area. But yeah, thank you all for coming out.